They'll race here at Pocono International Raceway on Sunday, but they'll do so with heavy hearts. A man who carried his family's rich racing heritage with vitality, dignity, and respect has tragically left us. And tonight, we will pay tribute to Davey Allison, driver of the Texaco Haviland Ford, on This Week in NASCAR. And now, from the Pocono Ramada Inn in Lake Harmony, Pennsylvania, here's the host of This Week in NASCAR, Eli Gold.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to This Week in NASCAR, a very sad week for NASCAR and the world of motorsports in general, with the passing of Davey Allison. That's the subject of our show tonight. Normally, we sign on with a special guest in the seat here to my right, a driver, a car owner, a newsmaker, but basic racing talk just seems kind of shallow and trite this evening, so instead we'll spend this hour looking back on the career of Davey Allison and sharing some of your thoughts as well with the rest of America. Today was a very special day in Bessemer, Alabama. Actually, the festivities surrounding Davey Allison and the family, well, they go on forever. This is a family that's been celebrated in Alabama, and the word festivities really is true, because one of the priests today, in the midst of the eulogy at Davey's funeral, said, you know, we are really ones here who should be celebrating the life of Davey Allison. He said it was a festive life, and what a lucky man Davey Allison truly is. He said, yes, he has left this earth at the age of 32. He said, but think about what Davey Allison has experienced, what Davey Allison has meant to so many people, the people he has touched. The priest went on to talk about how many folks at the age of 32 or 42 or 52 are still looking for that special niche in life. But Davey Allison, from when he was this high, knew exactly what he wanted to do. The priest said he went back to the elementary school in Hueytown to get some of Davey's classroom records the other day and to see and maybe share some of his accomplishments with all who were gathered at the church this morning. And the priest laughed, as did everybody else, when he said that list really wasn't very long. But he said the comments on the report card from the teacher in 4th grade said, Davey is a nice boy, but he spends too much time thinking about auto racing. When he was in 5th grade, the comments were a little bit better. He said, Davey's a nice guy, but now he's daydreaming about auto racing in the middle of class. Here's a man who knew exactly what he did want to do in life, and he went on to strive for it and become a true champion. And tonight, we'll spend this hour celebrating the fact that we got to know this very special man. We enjoyed his work on the racetrack. He touched so many across the country. Those of us who are able to know him, live nearby, happy to be able to call him a very dear friend. And tonight, we celebrate that, the life of Davey Allison. But this show is also your show, as it is each and every Thursday evening. And we'd love to hear from you this evening as well. So many have called in. So many have already contacted the Allison family with a condolence or a special story about when they first met Davey Allison and what he meant to them. If you'd like to share some of those thoughts with us this evening, our phone lines are open. They're toll-free, as is the case every Thursday night, at 1-800-292-5551. You don't have to have a racing question, just a thought or a story will be fine in a night like this. We'll also spend part of this next hour looking back on the 6 different visits that Davey Allison paid to this set over the course of the last 4 years. We have been with him at many locales, from the racing shop in Hueytown to hotels and other locations all across the country. We'll look back on some of those evenings as well and share some memories together. So we're so happy you've been able to join us here tonight as we look back on a great career and celebrate the life of Davey Allison. That's the thrust of this evening's edition of This Week in NASCAR. It's live from Pocono, Pennsylvania, in just a moment. To get here, the ceremonies in Bessemer, Alabama today, as you would expect, with a turnout the likes of which the state of Alabama had never seen, shy possibly of Bear Bryant's funeral many years ago. Thousands upon thousands of racing fans and literally the entire NASCAR family. All the drivers now scrambling to make their travel arrangements to get here to the Poconos in time for the track to open tomorrow. Every named driver was there today. even those that came a long, long way. Veteran Herschel McGriff from Bridal Veil, Oregon. Mario Andretti was there from Nazareth, Pennsylvania. The biggest stars and those drivers who don't often get their name in the top listings. Eddie Beerswall was there. Del McCowart was there. Car owners, entire crew chiefs, presidents of corporations, politicians from across this country. It was quite a turnout today in Bessemer, Alabama, to honor Davey Allison. Davey and his dad were really some of the very first guests we ever had on This Week in NASCAR. We're now in our 4th year, but it was the 9th show of this series, back some 4 years ago now, that Bobby and Davey were first with us together, and Bobby was talking about the growing process and the learning process for Davey Allison to become a champion racer.
I feel like Davey came along, and, you know, the first thing he did in racing was assist me in the shop down there at Hueytown. And, you know, here was a 16-year-old kid that was coming in and doing stuff that a lot of the really acclaimed race mechanics were not able to do. He'd come in after school and work late into the night on the engines and stuff, and really did a neat job, you know. That really meant a lot to me. And as he got into the car and began to race some, you know, when he had success, I really had to get a big kick out of that.
Sure. One thing is for sure, we've seen a lot of different looks on people over the years. Every time Davey joined us on the show, it seemed he had a different look, a new hat. I didn't have quite the gray hair I do today, so I guess we all change. It was interesting that Davey's learning curve was the subject of another question from a caller. A couple of years later, we were doing the show at Davey's Racing Shop, which used to be Bobby Allison Racing in Hueytown, Alabama, and a fan called in again talking 2 years down the road about Davey's learning curve under the guidance of his dad, Bobby Allison. Not to say that you don't know how, though, because your dad, Bobby Allison, did not spoon-feed you all this stuff. He showed you and then said, all right, son, go ahead and do it. I've seen you underneath these cars building them from the ground up.
Right here in this shop is where I learned how to build a race car. I learned how to weld, learned how to use a cutting torch, learned how to use bandsaws, sheet metal shears and brakes, everything right here in this shop, because I did build a lot of my own race cars in the early days and worked hard to get to where we are right now with a lot of help along the way, and couldn't have done it without all that help. You know, there's too many names to recognize them all, but they know who they are, and I appreciate them helping me to get to this point. But now my responsibilities are different. Now I have to go out and make the sponsorship appearances, keep the sponsors happy, meet with Ford people, right, you know, and go around and do different things for this team other than turning wrenches. But it's still a vital part of the job.
And Davey Allison is one of those who really could build a race car from the top down, and it really turned out to be something that the entire Robert Gates racing team was able to lean on Davey about as they prepared each and every week on the NASCAR Winston Cup Series. As we mentioned, a lot of folks across the country with special thoughts, remembrances, and condolences to share this evening with other racing fans and the Allison family. So let's get to the phones, and our first stop is Englewood, Colorado, where John joins us tonight. Hello, John.
Hi, Eli. How's it going?
Very well, in light of a very tough week.
Yeah, I imagine, you know, he's a great race driver, and I'm really sorry to see what happened. Being up here in Englewood, we don't have ties with Alan Kalicki or Davey, but how can we send a condolence to the family?
Well, the best thing I can suggest to you is this, is to grab a pencil and paper, and we'll be giving you the address a bit later on. It's really very simple to remember. It's the Allison family, Post Office Box 28, appropriately enough, in Hueytown, Alabama. But we'll flash it on the screen for you a bit later on and be able to give you a chance to jot it down. So grab a pencil and paper. Dwayne is joining us next from the Carolinas with a question. Good evening, Dwayne.
Yes, hi, Eli. How you doing this evening?
Fine, thank you.
I had the privilege of meeting Davey Allison in '88 at a local racetrack around here, and he was a very nice person. He raced in the race, finished decent, and he'll be remembered. Not forgotten, but remembered.
He was one of those guys who learned so very well from his dad, not only building the race cars, we've just heard the comments on those snips from previous shows, but how many times have we seen Bobby Allison, after a long, long, hot day in the race car, literally pour himself out of a race car and spend hours signing autographs. Same thing with Davey. When he got out of the race car, it didn't matter where he was, where he finished. He might ask for a couple of minutes to cool off or something like that, but after a while it was right back to the signing of the autographs, and he would stay there until each and every fan had been satisfied, and that's why he's touched so many people. Our next call this evening is from Brad. He's in Rome, Georgia, watching on Sports South. Good evening, sir.
Hello, Eli.
Hello, Brad.
I would just like to say I enjoy your show and give my condolences to the Allison family.
Sure.
I've never had the pleasure of meeting Davey Allison, but I've always enjoyed his racing, and he's always put on a great show for us fans.
He really did. That's one thing he was very proud of. He went out there and gave it 100%, and but he was a very special person. He really was. I speak from personal knowledge, living 15 minutes from Hueytown, where my wife and daughter and I live in the southern suburbs of Birmingham. And when we first moved to the Birmingham area, our last name, as far as Davey was concerned, was Allison. He took us into the family as well as he did anybody else. He said, heck, you're in the world of racing, you're living in Birmingham, you're part of us, and our family was embraced by Davey, by Bobby, by the entire family, and that's something that certainly we'll never forget. And just another part of that special something that made Davey Allison a very, very special man. We're going to break away here for a moment or so, but as we do, you might want to jot down the address that you'll be seeing on the screen. There have been a number of different charitable organizations that have been mentioned as possible recipients of donations, should you so desire. The National Head Injury Foundation in Washington, D.C. is one of those that's been designated by the Allison family as a good cause to receive your donations in honor of Davey Allison. We're coming right back. This week, this chair remains empty, and we'll spend time talking about the life and career of Davey Allison and sharing some of your very special thoughts with us as well. We don't want to forget Red Farmer either. Red, as has well been documented, was a passenger in that helicopter that crashed so tragically early on Monday afternoon. Red Farmer has been released from the Bessemer Caraway Methodist Hospital in Birmingham. He's doing as well as can be expected. Painful, yes, the injuries are, and painful, certainly, the emotional trauma that's been undergone by all the friends and family over the last number of days. We saw Red last night at the church and again today at the funeral, and he is doing fine as far as all of his ailments are concerned. Red Farmer was just like a family member to the Allisons. Bobby and Red and all of those fellows who made up the original Alabama gang coming north from Florida to the state of Alabama. As a matter of fact, in one of our early shows back in May of 1990, the subject of Red Farmer came up after a question was thrown to Davey Allison.
And my question is to Davey. I was wondering, I've heard some rumors about Red Farmer joining your Winston Cup team as a full-time crew chief. Is there anything to that?
No, I'm not going to let Red out of Hueytown. I'm going to keep him on the Busch Grand National car, and he's too valuable to me right there in Hueytown. So, and he likes Alabama too. Alabama's his home, so he's not going to leave.
That was May of 1990. Just about exactly a year later, in May of 91, again we had the chance to have Davey on as the guest, and with the show coming from his shop in Hueytown, we decided to bring the old redhead onto the set with us as well. It was a late night for Red Farmer. He said, boy, it's well past my bedtime, but it turned out to be a show that was one of the most well-received that we've done in this series of 4-year broadcasts, and the laughter from that evening continues to resound throughout that garage, I'm sure. Red, I'm curious about your work and relationship with Davey. A few weeks ago, we were at Bobby Allison's shop up in Charlotte, and Hut Strickland was on, and of course there's the family relationship there with Hut being married to Donnie's daughter, Pam. Although there's not the family relationship necessarily with yourself and Davey, there might as well be. We've all been together in this area for so long. Do you guys have to get in each other's face every now and then, and who backs down first when you have to?
Well, we haven't really come to that yet. We just have a friendly discussion, as we call it. See, you have to have that with the driver, you know, keep him straight. But we're both drivers.
And team owner.
But he's the owner, so he's the boss. But He understands, you know, we get along good together because we're both trying to do the same thing. We're trying to put him in the winner's circles and give him a good car, and we try to work together to the advantage. And, you know, when we discuss the thing, when we have a chassis problem or something, we both try to discuss it, see his idea, my idea, and we compromise and split it down the middle.
There you go. And it always seemed to work that way because both of those fellows found their way to victory lane more often than so many others. We do want to welcome those of you in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut joining us now on the Madison Square Garden Network. We spend this evening honoring Davey Allison, who lost his life in that tragic helicopter accident earlier this week. We're asking you to join us on the phones, as always, with a special thought, a remembrance, a story about Davey Allison as we celebrate his life tonight here on This Week in NASCAR. AJ is with us from Middletown, New York, with a question. Good evening, AJ.
Hi, Eli.
Hi.
I was just wondering, is there any way we could have an address for myself, a few of my friends to send cards to Bobby and to the family, you know, because we up here, we're kind of hurt.
Certainly
by this
so.
too.
And since this is the second time it's been asked for, why don't we put it up on the screen right now and let everybody jot it down. We'll show it to you again a bit later on, and anybody who might want to send any correspondence at all to the entire Allison family can do so at Post Office Box 28 in Hueytown, Alabama. The zip code, as you see, is 35023. Just to the Allison family, Post Office Box 28, Hueytown, Alabama, 35023. Now to the phone calls, and Julie, who joins us next with a question. Hello, Julie. How are you in Tampa, Florida tonight?
Oh, we're a little wet and hot. How you doing, Eli?
Well, we're getting through a very tough week, but glad you've joined us tonight.
We never had a chance to actually meet Davey, but my story is that my 3-year-old son has been an idol, is Davey, and he caught it on the news when they announced his death, and he still isn't dealing with it very well. And we just want to give our condolences to the family and to all the other fans.
And it's interesting that you mention a young child, because that's one thing that Davey Allison just loved. In addition, obviously, to his own 2 children, Krista, Marie, and Robbie, he also was always involved with the youngsters around the racetrack. He had a soft spot for those who were involved in the Make-A-Wish Foundation, youngsters who were terminally ill and were wishing to go to a race, and they always seemed to have Davey Allison around, leading them through the garage area. He'd visit hospitals. He didn't want the publicity either. I was privy to some of that stuff, living in Alabama nearby, and I knew Davey was going up to the Children's Hospital, and he'd always say, "No, don't say anything about it. It's just something I want to do. I'm not doing this for any publicity or anything like that." Another side of Davey Allison that made him a very, very special man. Of course, the racing world moves on. The race here at Pocono will be run this weekend. Next week, it's on at Talladega, Alabama. The week after, the Busch Series is in action, and so on, and our show moves on as well. Next week, we will be in Talladega prior to the running of the Die Hard 500. This show will be originating at the International Motorsports Hall of Fame, just adjacent to the Talladega Superspeedway. That's 10 o'clock in the Central Time Zone, where the show will originate. We would love to see you there, or certainly right here on your Prime Network affiliate. And in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be taking this show over to the Nashville Network, TNN's studios. The show will still be seen on Prime Network, but will be originating from the TNN studios in Nashville, again at 10 o'clock Central Time. And I promise you that there'll not be any singing, at least not from me, on that show at the TNN studios. We're going to come right back, and as we leave you now, a quick look at the address at which you might like to send a donation to the Fund for the Allison Children, the National Bank of Commerce, Hueytown, Alabama. Tonight we are spending this hour as a tribute to Davey Allison, who lost his life in that tragic helicopter accident earlier this week. We're also spending part of this hour looking back onto the 6 different visits that Davey made to this show over the course of these last 4 years. One of those visits was in Rockingham, North Carolina, when he and his Winston Cup car owner, Robert Yates, spent some time with us talking about what makes their racing team go. Let's go down to Pembroke Pines, Florida. Carl is watching on the Sunshine Network tonight. Hello.
Hi, Eli, Davey, Robert. How y'all doing?
Good, thank you.
My question is, basically anybody can answer it, but my question is, every week it seems like there are, 10, 12, maybe even 14 cars after qualifying who have a good crack at winning, yet it seems like the same 6 or 7 end up in the top 10. What is it that those teams seem to be able to put together that the rest of the teams just aren't able to?
Consistency. That's the biggest thing. As a group, you know, when a group of guys gets together and they work good together, they're able to prepare a car every week the best it can be done. And unless they have some kind of a freak situation happen, like what happened with Ernie Irvin a couple weeks ago, or some sort of engine trouble, or get involved in that accident on the racetrack, it just seems that they're the ones that are consistent, and they finish up front every week. Not necessarily, not speaking directly of Ernie Irvin, but like Earnhardt's group and
Sure.
Mark Martin has just been tremendously competitive this year and consistent.
And of course, that team had a consistent run themselves just last weekend at the New Hampshire International Speedway, having to settle for 3rd place in an event that, very honestly, had it not been for a late race caution flag, they might very well have won. Chris is joining us tonight from Roswell, New Mexico, with a comment. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Eli. I'd like to say that I enjoy the show very much, and
Thank you, sir.
I believe that it's very sad with the death of Davey this week and Alan Kawicki at the first of the year. But I'd like to say, with all the special places that people have been donating money and sending cards, has it ever, the thought ever occurred to anybody to take the money from the Winston Cup champ and donate it to these different organizations, and then maybe this year, with the death of these 2 great drivers, make them co-champions this year?
Well, I must say I've not heard any discussion along those lines. To make them co-champions, both of those gentlemen are great champion racers. I don't think they would want to be given anything. I'm sure Alan Kawicki and Davey Allison are both knowing that they're well remembered and well respected, but to give a championship that has not been won on the racetrack is nothing that the Allison family or the Kawicki family has ever stood for. So I know what your sentiment is about, and I know where you're coming from, but I don't expect we would see anything quite along those lines. A visitor here at the Ramada Inn in Pocono has a question or a comment tonight. Hello, Bobby.
Hello, Eli. I'd like to send my condolences to the Allison family. It seems unfair that one family should be the burden of all the tragedy. And I would like to know your favorite story of Davey Allison.
Oh, man, there are so many stories, and I don't know which one to share with you, but one that this happened the other day. We were flying home from New Hampshire, and it's not unusual that I had a chance to fly home with Davey. Anytime he had an extra seat on his airplane, he'd offer it to me, because we do live in the same town, and it helped me get home back to my family a bit more quickly. And Davey knew that I'm terribly ticklish. And Larry McReynolds, his crew chief, his Winston Cup crew chief, is very ticklish. And it just, Davey thought it was the greatest thing in the world. He got the greatest hoot out of life when he would sneak up behind us and just tippy-toe up behind us and start tickling us until we had to yell uncle for him to stop. And I'm not a small man, and Larry McReynolds is a grown-up, not quite as large as I, but nevertheless a good-sized man. And here are the two of us just literally writhing in pain in the aisle of the airplane flying home from New Hampshire. Then we'd finally sit down. Davey gave us a chance to catch our breath, and for the rest of the flight, we'd be sitting there on the end of our chair, kind of looking right and looking left to expect Davey to come sneaking up behind us again. And he thought that was just the funniest thing. So there are many, many stories that come to mind, but that one is the most recent. That just took place on Sunday, flying home from New Hampshire, in what turned out now in retrospect to be about 4 of the most very special hours I got to spend with Davey Allison. We're coming back. We'll take more of your comments. We'll have more of the retrospective on the life and career of Davey Allison. And again, we'll show you the address in Hueytown, Alabama, for those of you who might like to drop a line to Liz or to Bobby and Judy or to any member of the Allison family. We're coming right back. Watch Sterling Marlin and Ricky Rudd get together in Bristol, Tennessee, leading Davey Allison to the closest finish in NASCAR history. And there you are.
Too close for comfort.
Too close
Even
for comfort.
Even watching it now.
But they don't pay you by the margin of victory. They just pay you by victory.
Well, as long as the camera shows that we were clearly ahead, then I don't care how close it was.
Did you think
We didn't know it.
you couldn't tell from the pitch?
They asked me, they said, well, what do you think? I said, we won, right?
Remember that finish? That was one of the classics in NASCAR Winston Cup racing, one of Davey Allison's 19 career wins. Let's take a question from Scott, who joins us now in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Hello.
Hello.
Good evening,
Hello,
sir.
Eli.
How are you?
All right. For all the race fans in Parkersburg, West Virginia, we send our condolences to the Allison family, and we hope that Davey and Alan race in heaven.
We appreciate those sentiments. Thank you very much for calling in. Our number is open to you toll-free, 1-800-292-5551. Bruce is next on the phone lines in Dover, Delaware. Hello, Bruce.
Hey, Eli, I just want to tell you we look forward to your program every week, but this week I was a little concerned about how you're going to handle it, and I think this one's tops. You're giving us a chance to share our feelings and express ourselves, and I appreciate that. We just want the Allison family to know that we're thinking about them, and they're in our prayers. And also, I think it's also unique about NASCAR more than any other sport that even though you might have a favorite driver, no matter who your favorite driver is, when one of them has a loss like this, we all feel it, and it's like a family member that's gone. And I think that's really special about NASCAR more than the other sports, and I think that's a real tribute to NASCAR and their organization.
It really is, because when you take a look at the NASCAR way of life, this is really a traveling community. From the drivers to the crew to the car owners to the media members to the folks who sell the souvenirs to the people who are in all sorts of support roles. You move from one city to the next to the next. You're on the road with these folks at least 4 days a week, and you oftentimes spend more time with your racing family than you do with your own family, and that's something that NASCAR has been able to build on. As a matter of fact, there was a very nice comment excerpted in the Birmingham, Alabama newspaper today that came from the New York Times, a newspaper that has started picking up in stock car racing coverage over the last couple of years. And the New York Times slant on all that's taken place this week was that family atmosphere that you see in NASCAR racing that oftentimes doesn't come through in Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, the National Football League, and so on. And of course, family was something that was very special to Davey Allison. As a matter of fact, every time the circuit went to Talladega, Alabama, the Talladega Superspeedway, it was a very special time for Davey, getting a chance to show what he could do to all those local race fans, and there were thousands of them there pulling for Davey each race. There's nothing like winning here at your home track, is there?
Well, you know, this is a special place. All my family's there, my friends are there, people that I grew up with, some of the people that are here in the audience that I grew up with, and they come out to the race to watch. And then, you know, being from Alabama, when you think of other Alabamians in the stands, it's almost like you're just one big happy family, and it's great to win in front of your family and your friends.
Davey Allison was able to do many, many times, both in ARCA competition and for the NASCAR Winston Cup Series. Let's go to Detroit, Michigan now for our next question. Ken, good evening, and thanks for waiting.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I'd like to send my condolences to the Allison family. And second of all, I'd like to know if number 28 will be driven this weekend in David's memory. And if, who will it be?
No, it will not be run this weekend for a number of reasons. Some obviously were merely logistical, and obviously others went a whole lot more deeply than that. On a logistical basis, the car would have had to have left the Charlotte, North Carolina area sometime early today, certainly, and there's no way that the crew would have asked truck driver Norman Koshimitsu not to go to the funeral in Alabama, but instead drive the car up here. There was no way that team could have prepared a race car for a driver. It's just the emotion. As Robert Yates said, we just need time to grieve. We need time to mourn, and it would just not be appropriate to put anybody in a race car at 200 miles an hour down this main straightaway here at Pocono in a car that maybe wasn't prepared correctly. The team just needs time to be by themselves with their family and formalize some plans. Now the question obviously is, from a pure racing standpoint, what is the next move? Does the team look for a stopgap driver, someone to carry through the rest of this season? Do they look for somebody who is young and could be the future of Robert Yates Racing. There were a couple of names mentioned in the papers today. One was Bobby Hamilton, one was Chad Little. There was a third name that was being mentioned in quieter tones, but from people who might know a bit more than some of the news media. That driver's name we won't disclose here this evening. It really wouldn't be appropriate to do so. But the talk and thoughts are now beginning to turn to the future, because what those guys know is racing. The car will be back, one has to assume, at Talladega next week, and we'll all find out certainly by this time next week who that driver might be to fill those awfully big shoes. We're going to come right back, taking more of your thoughts about Davey Allison. But again, the address for the National Head Injury Foundation is coming up on the screen now for those of you who might choose to make a donation to that foundation in the memory of Davey Allison. We'll be right back. He wasn't afraid to let the occasional cuss word slip through his lips, but when one happened to swing through during a telecast of This Week in NASCAR, as he sat on the podium with his crew chief, Larry McReynolds, Davey wasn't quite sure how to handle things. It was a caller who was a Ford fan. And here's what happened back in November of 1991.
And Davey, thanks for making us Ford fans proud this year. You know, at the start of the year, it looked like we were going to get our asses whipped. But why don't you do us a favor and do the same thing to them come Sunday? Too bad that Dale...
Well, I'll tell you what.
I think you could.
You're right. It did look like we were going to be in a lot of trouble.
He sidestepped that one a whole lot more smoothly than I was able to, certainly. Tim is next to share a thought with us, joining us from Westwego, Louisiana. Hello, Tim. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you, Eli. I just want to say that Davey Allison, he was a great family man, and my family, I have two kids. They're 6 and 7, and they were big Davey Allison fans. But every time they saw him racing, they'd run up to the TV and say, "That's Davey Allison." My son even has some of his racing cards, and he's going to be missed, and I send my condolences to the Allison family.
Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. I remembered seeing Davey at Krista's birthday party. His daughter Krista, now 3 and a half. Birthday is December the 24th, and we were always invited to join. Our little girl, also 3 and a half, and we went over to the Skateland skating rink in Hueytown, and watching Davey Allison up on skates was really a sight to behold. He was no Morgan Shepherd on roller skates, I promise you that, but he was out there having a great time, pulling people around and just being part of the community. That was another of those special moments that stick in your mind as we all look back tonight on the life and times of Davey Allison, who is always going to be in our mind. As we mentioned, children so very much a part of Davey's life and his family. Krista Marie, as we say, is 3 and a half. Robert Gray Allison, Robbie as everybody knows him, now a year and a half old. For those of you who might like to make a contribution to the children of Davey Allison, there has been a special bank account set up at the National Bank of Commerce, Hueytown, Alabama. Again, the zip code is 35023. That for the children of Davey Allison. Out on Long Island, Lake Ronkonkoma, New York, with a question. Hello, Bob. How are you?
Fine, Eli. We're real sad out here. We want to send our condolences to the Allison family. And we hear that perhaps Bobby is going to get out of racing now. Is there any truth to that? Do you know?
I have heard nothing along those lines at all. As a matter of fact, I'd be very, very surprised. You know, he came back after Clifford passed away 11 months ago, and after some time, I would assume he will be back at the racetrack again. The NASCAR family is his support family, along with that huge Allison family that literally spans coast to coast, east, west, north, and south. What Bobby Allison knows is racing, and he's got the Jimmy Spencer team. He's got a lot of people who make their livelihood as part of Bobby Allison Motorsports. I don't know for a fact, but if I had to make an educated guess here this evening, I'd say that we'll see Bobby Allison back at the racetrack in due time. But thank you for your call. Next on the phone line is Fritz, joining us from Interlochen, New York. Hello, Fritz.
Good evening, Eli. You got a wonderful show, and under the circumstances, I think you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you, sir.
A couple of things. First of all, purely from a racing side, I'd love to see somebody like Mike McLaughlin get a chance to help out the team. And on the other side, I keep hearing the word family. Family is not just NASCAR. It's all over the country. It's from the dirt tracks up north. Everybody is part of this family that has racing. And Davey was not one of my favorites, but he's a brother in racing, and nobody needs to lose a brother. My condolences to the family and everybody in the family.
Thank you for taking the time to join us. You know, I want to spend a moment here looking way back into Davey's racing career. The first time I had a chance to meet him at a big track, and so too many of you folks possibly, was back in the days of what he called the Peach Fuzz Gang. That was really the name of his pit crew. They would go that truck down the road in Hueytown, Alabama. Nothing like the fancy transporters that we see today, but it was just a beat-up old truck with a race car behind it, and there on the side of the truck was the Peach Fuzz Gang, and there they were going off to the next race. As a matter of fact, when Davey and Larry McReynolds was on the show with us back in November of 1991, the subject of the Peach Fuzz Gang came up in conversation that night.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. My dad nicknamed us that because Randy Hill and myself were the two oldest on the crew at that time. We were 19 years old, and neither one was shaving yet. We had Greg Campbell, Kenny Allison, Mike Allison, Danny DeFreitas, Andy Waldrop, and my brother Clifford as well. And the only one of the whole group that was shaving was my grandfather, Pop Allison.
I would hope.
Yeah, he was the ringleader of the whole outfit. And I remember we used to ride up the road, and he always sat on the right side. He didn't drive the truck. He didn't ride the back seat. He'd sit right by the door on the right side with his arms folded. He never turned his head. He just sat there and looked straight ahead the whole time. And if anybody got out of line, he didn't even have to turn around and look at them. He'd just call their name out. So, all right, straighten up.
And that was the truth. We used to see that truck going down the road, and there was Pop just sitting there in that right front seat, not moving a muscle, but very proud of the fellas that were in the back of that truck, I promise you that. Now to a viewer who joins us on one of our new sports channel affiliates out in the San Francisco Bay Area. John is watching in Milpitas, California. Hello, John.
Hello, Eli. Eli, I'd love to thank you for this opportunity for myself as well as many people to give their condolences to the Allisons. Sure. We have all lost somebody very great, somebody very dear to us. Thank you very much, Eli.
Well, thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
Our phone number, 1-800-292-5551. Mike is with us next on the line from Troy, New York. Hello.
Yes, yeah, I'm calling from South Troy, and all of us down here, or up here in New York, are really saddened by the death of Davey Allison, because we're all a lot of race fans up here. And I was wondering, would you know if Bobby's car would be pulled from competition this weekend out of respect for his son, or no?
No, Bobby's team plans to run the Meineke Muffler Ford. We saw some of the manufacturer's reps here earlier. The crew was at the church in Bessemer today for the funeral services, but their plans are to run as scheduled here. You know, racing has to continue. You've got an 80,000-seat grandstand, or whatever the size is here at Pocono. It is sold out. Those folks are expecting to see a first-class NASCAR Winston Cup show. And again, Bobby Allison is a racer. Everybody understands the situation upon which the Robert Yates team finds themselves. But as far as the Meineke team for Jimmy Spencer, they'll have heavy hearts, certainly, but Jimmy's also going to have a very heavy gas pedal foot, I promise you that. He'll be out there. We're going to break away right here, but again, I do want to take a moment to remind you where we'll be over the next couple of weeks as we get back to our very normal format of This Week in NASCAR. We'll be at the International Motorsports Hall of Fame in Talladega next Thursday night. That's just adjacent to the Talladega Superspeedway. We'd love to see you there in person at 10 o'clock Central Time, 11 o'clock Eastern, or just certainly tune in right here on Prime Network. In 2 weeks, on to the studios of the Nashville Network. The folks at TNN kind enough to allow us to wander into the Music City. Hope you can make your plans to join us right here for more of This Week in NASCAR. As we break away, we'll take a look once more at that address in Hueytown, Alabama, Post Office Box 28, Hueytown 35023, to correspond with the Allison family. The 6 visits that Davey Allison made to this show, there always seemed to be a constant. He loved to rib me every now and then about the fact that we always pulled for different sports teams. I have had the pleasure of broadcasting University of Alabama football and basketball for the last 6 years. Davey Allison was a fan of the cross-state school, the Auburn Tigers, and he and I would always be snipping at each other off the air and on the air, as we found out after a question came from a visitor to the Allison Racing Shops in Hueytown one night a couple of years ago.
Thank you, Eli. Davey, we know that Eli, being from Alabama, does a couple different type of sporting events. We were just curious of sporting events that you like to go to if you ever get some time off away from the racetrack.
Well, I enjoy all sports. I like to watch baseball and football and a little bit of basketball. You know, Alabama's not a big basketball state, but I like to hunt and fish and do a lot of that.
It is for one school.
It is for one school?
Yeah, Alabama University thereof has a pretty good basketball team.
I hadn't heard of them.
Oh, right. This goes on all the time. Davey and I go back and forth about allegiances to athletics here in the state of Alabama. You do a good bit of hunting and fishing, though, when you get some free time. That's how you kind of unwind, isn't it?
I do a good bit of hunting and fishing. We have an outstanding hunting season here in Alabama. We won't go into that too much, but I have a Gambler bass boat, and I love to take it to the river and run up and down the river and maybe do a little fishing along the way.
I bet. Davey Allison always had that moment to rib everybody, but also enjoyed those moments he had away from the racetrack. In November of 1992, he was again on this show, and he was fielding a question about the responsibilities that a driver has and how Davey always managed to find time for his legion of fans. As we had talked earlier, regardless of the circumstance, he always had time for the fans, or at least almost always.
And for you yourself, I can never know of anybody who is doing a better job of following the Allison legend as you are. And I've known your dad for a long time, and you guys have always signed autographs, talked to you, and you just really make you feel like you really care about the people that watch you and love you. So good luck in the coming weekend, and let me know about your dad.
Well, first of all, thank you. You know, that makes us feel good because we try to take care of everybody we can out there with the autographs and the requests and everything. And, you know, sometimes we get pushed for time and we have to walk away. And that's the toughest part of my job.
And it really did hurt him when he didn't get a chance to sign those last few autographs. Murfreesboro, Tennessee, a quick question. Good evening, Ron. How are you?
I'm fine, Eli. How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir.
I serve in the Air Force and have for 29 years, but I've never forgotten where I come from here in East Tennessee. My last name is Allison, and it's been my privilege many, many times across the world for people to ask me if I was acquainted with Bobby or Davey. I'm not, but this week it's certainly been a loss, and we grieve with the Allison family. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to join us. We're going to come back and join you for a final thought or two here in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, as tonight we pay tribute to Davey Allison on This Week in NASCAR. We'll be right back to wind things up. Stay with us. For sharing our collective thoughts about Davey Allison and how he has touched all of us at one time or another. I do want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us with your very special comments, and we look forward to being with you again next week here on This Week in NASCAR. They always say that these shows in the world of sports should be fairly easy to do. This has been a very tough week for all of us. We've lost a superstar, we've lost a friend, a father, a husband, a very special young man. Davey Allison, though, will always live on. His spirit is with us, and we thank you so much for sharing these special moments with us. I'm Eli Gold. Thanks so much for being with us. Good night, everybody.
This Week in NASCAR has